Welcome to the Retreat Leaders Podcast, your sanctuary with retreat experts, where we spill the tea on retreat success. Here we dive into crafting transformational guest experiences, talk about how to avoid pitfalls, and unlock marketing secrets. Whether you're a seasoned guru or a budding enthusiast, we've got the inside scoop for you. Join us as we learn how to flourish in this magical world of retreats. Welcome to the Retreat Leaders Podcast, formerly the Happy Hour Podcast. This is Shannon, and I get the privilege of bringing back a guest for the second time because our conversation was so rich, and it was like I had back-to-back recordings, and I was like, no, we can't end the conversation here. But welcome back to the show, Dr. Robyn McKay. How are you?
I'm so happy to be here. I'm great today. I'm out at the farm where we host our retreats, and I'm looking at our calendar for October and November to see when we can have some folks out here to work with the horses and to spend some time sitting on the front porch, reconnecting with themselves. So all is good on my end today.
I love that. I love that so much. So and I will link in the show notes our first show. So if you're just jumping into the podcast and you're like, what the hell are they talking about? Go visit the first show where we chatted, because I kind of want to pick up from there, Robyn, and maybe let's first revisit a little bit about the psychology of retreats in general, like what happens, because what I want to get to today and really dig into is how retreat leaders can monetize this. But it's also obviously beneficial for the clients, because there's nothing that I ever want to do where it's not beneficial both ways. But let's just revisit a little bit about the psychology of retreats.
Well, thank you. And if you're just joining us too, I have a PhD in counseling psychology. I've been hosting retreats since I was still in grad school when I started hosting retreats. So I will say like 2006 or something like that. And, the impetus for me wanting to even bring retreats into my business model, and one of the reasons I love it so much is because I started way back during my spiritual awakening going to retreats. And I learned so much about the benefit to myself as being a retreat participant. So I got to learn from the best. The people who hosted the retreats that I went on when I was just getting started were impeccable in what they did. And then, of course, I got to continue the development on the other side as I started leading retreats as well. So I wanted to bring that forward because when it comes to the psychology of retreats, it's not my first rodeo anyway. I know a thing or two about it. And both from a participant and also from a retreat leader. And so one of the things I think is important to think about with the psychology of retreats is to understand that a retreat is a place out of time. It's a container out of time. It's a place where you can go to get away from your ordinary life and to discover things about yourselves that maybe you kind of have a sense of in the back of your mind, but it definitely is not prominent in your day-to-day life. So it is a place out of time. And in those places out of time and out of space, I will say, we have the ability to look at ourselves in a new way, to learn things about ourselves that perhaps we had not discovered before, and to explore what it means to be our own person. Okay, so when we talk about transformational retreats, that's kind of the overarching theme of them, is an exploration of who I am as a person. What is my purpose? Why am I here? We can get into some of the existential questions, even as we're doing things like recovering from burnout or doing stress reduction or anything like that. All of those sort of interventions that we do at retreats is simply to get us to the point where we can ask those questions and perhaps find some answers and come back different than how we went into the retreat. Now, there's this old, I think it's a Buddhist saying, which is, what do you do before enlightenment? You chop wood and you carry water. And what do you do on the other side of enlightenment? You chop wood and carry water. And hopefully on the other side of the retreats, yes, we're still doing the things that we've always done, chopping wood and carrying water, but we're doing them in a new way. And that really illustrates the psychology of the transformation, is that we want to come back into our ordinary lives changed in some way, having a different perspective, having a different way of interacting with ourselves and with other people in the world. One of the challenges, I think, of a retreat coming back in, re-entry into your life, can be sometimes a little bit crunchy. And so
what a good description.
Yes, it's crunchy. It can be crunchy. The reentry can be a little bit painful. And that's where retreat leaders have to be aware that there are a couple of different ways that people are going to reenter. They're going to reenter completely changed. And people around them will say, oh, who are you? I don't recognize you. Why are you so different? And maybe we can't explain why we are different, but we know we are different. If there's too much social pressure that, oh, you are so different, perhaps we will like to go back to the way things were before. And truly, we can't. It's like when you learn something, you can't unknow it. And so too is the case with retreats. But ultimately, I think retreat leaders have the responsibility to also understand that there are some people who are going to try as best they can to discard the experience or to contain it. Perhaps it maybe is a better word to use than discard, and make it be something that is outside of their normal experiences, and they will just go back to their normal lives. We want to, as much as we can, for those who desire the continued transformation, to prevent that from happening. And the way that we will do that is by giving them another container to step into on the other side of the retreat. So it doesn't feel like such an abrupt shift from the place out of time, the existential aha moments that we have had, and then we come back into ordinary life and we say, I'm different.
What the hell?
Yeah.
What do I do now?
What do I do now? Not only that, but that feeling that even when you go on vacation, the feeling of vacation lasts something between 24 and 48 hours, and then you kind of reacclimate to your life. And people invest a lot of money and time and energy into retreats. Why will we like them to go back to the way things were? Like, what is the point of the retreat otherwise?
I love this. And one of the things that really stands out to me is when you talk about you can't unlearn, right? You can't unlearn. And so I'm even wondering, and I've never really asked this question, but now I'm even wondering, Robyn, if just like you say, they go into the container of the retreat, they're changed in some way, right? They're changed in some way. They come out of that container. There's not a proper integration, and proper is different based on the retreat and the learning and what was going on. So take that for what it is, but there's not really an integration. And so you're right. They could get these social pressures. And so they're like, oof, I better stop, quote unquote, thinking this way. And then I'm wondering if, like you said, they contain that learning because you can't unlearn it. So they contain it. But I'm wondering if there's also a layer of like almost shame and guilt on top of that, knowing I could, or that awful word, should live differently, but I'm not going to because I feel this pressure. And so I'm going to contain it. And now I feel bad about that. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, that's the ultimate of self-abandonment or self-betrayal, isn't it? And I think oftentimes the people who are, at least in my world, the people who come into my retreats are the ones who they've accomplished so much already, and they're always asking what's next, or they're asking, is this all there is? And they're wanting to find those answers. They find the answer and they come back and they have the elixir in their hand, and then they set it aside and say, well, it's too much effort, or I could, but I'm not going to. And some of them make a conscious choice. And so, yes, in the back of their mind, there definitely can be that sense of self-betrayal or self-abandonment that, that's a psychological issue all unto itself, right? That people have to deal with both, I will say sometimes clinically, but oftentimes in coaching alliances and mentoring and things like that, just not betraying yourself, not abandoning yourself, not abandoning your vision.
I feel like a lot of people even come into the container of a retreat feeling that already, and to some degree, right? Because a lot of their day-to-day things that they're doing, or relationships they've gotten into, or jobs that they're doing, whatever may be the case, they feel like they've left themselves somewhere. They're not really tuned into who they really are. And so I feel like you're right. They might already be arriving with a little bit of that, or a lot, depending. And then there's that pile on of even additional abandonment after, if there's not an integration tool. Hey, retreat leaders. Are your retreats the hidden gems of the travel world just waiting to be discovered? Well, it's time to shine a spotlight on them. Introducing the ultimate guide you've been waiting for, our free guide, Top 11 Tips for Building an Email List for you, the retreat leaders. Imagine an email list packed with eager attendees, hanging on to your every word and ready to book at the click of a button. We share the blueprint to creating a list that sells. Don't miss out on the action. Learn how to connect deeply with your audience, boost your bookings, and create a buzz that fills every retreat. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, these 11 tips are your secret weapon to success. Visit retreatleaderlistbuilding.com now to grab your free copy and start building an email list that sells out your retreats. This is why I'm super excited to talk about what this could look like. So maybe give us some ideas of what that could look like and how retreat leaders could support their clients while also growing their business with these integration tools.
Yes, because it's important to have a business case for what's next. We don't want to sell something for the sake of selling it. That's not the kind of people that I work with, and that's not the kind of person that I am or the business that I run. So I'm always asking the question of what's next, and I will like to have a solution or a recommendation for each of my retreat members. Whether or not they say yes to the solution is up to them. I don't have attachment to it, but I want to at least have a solution, because as I made the point in the last episode that I was with you, one of the first retreats I didn't have something on the other end. And my client went on to spend thousands of dollars with one of my coaches, actually. And certainly she was ready for the change. I just missed the signal. So I always want to have a container on the other side of it. So I will start with how I do that in my business, and how I coach my clients who come in to learn how to do retreats themselves. And then we'll talk about a couple of other ways as well. So my business is primarily one-on-one and small group to begin with. So I don't have a membership site or anything like that I work in. And so when I'm looking at retreats, I'm inviting people into either a mastermind container or a private one-on-one coaching advising situation where they're meeting with me regularly to extend the work that they began in the retreat. So we say the retreat is the reset, or the retreat is the refinement. The retreat is the beginning, and then we could conceptualize it as aftercare, right? Or as an extension of it to continue the momentum. There are some people who leave retreats and say, I will take this on my own. Thank you very much. They take a more of a do-it-yourself approach. And then there are others in the retreat who will say, oh my goodness, yes, I would like you to work with me on this going forward. We've had this very personal experience in the retreat. You know me so well. We moved through this together, and I would like to continue that relationship. So in some ways, I conceptualize the retreat itself as a relationship building mechanism as well. And then what comes after is a natural outflow of the relationship being built and then extended into supporting them as they are moving in the direction of their goals and dreams that they often will have been revealed to them at the retreat. So that is one way. Mastermind, one-on-one coaching programs. Those are really good follow-ons to the retreat. There are some times when I hold a retreat independently, like it's a container into itself, and people will pay for the retreat. And then on the other side of it, the coaching is an add-on, I will say, or an extension. Another way that I will do that is I structure a retreat into a bigger package. So they will start with one-on-one, they go into the retreat, and then they continue in the one-on-ones after the retreat. So those are a couple of different models that I use. If I am doing a retreat and it is an independent container, I very rarely will sell during the retreat. In other words, I won't have somebody, fill out a piece of paper and say, yes, I want to work with you, and pay for their next thing at the retreat. I want a little bit of spaciousness, and I don't want to pressure people. Now, you may do that differently, and other people may have different opinions on that. That's what's worked for me. I always set up a time after the retreat to meet one-on-one with each of my guests to see what's next, to have conversations about how I can continue to support them and so on. And that seems to work very well in my business model.
I love that model, by the way. I do see a time and place for all, it depends on the retreat. It depends on the host. It depends on what the offering is. And definitely there's that mindset out there that, you got to get them while they're hot. And I know that's a terrible way of putting it, but it's kind of what we talked about last time, which is they're excited. They're in the moment. They are asking for that next step without asking for it, right? And so there's this concept of that's when you offer it. And again, there's a time and place for it. But I also love the time and place, this follow-up concept that you're talking about, which is you're just following up with each person post-retreat and saying, how can I further support you? And then that's an opportunity, right? And it's maybe a more, I don't know what the right word would be, but it's just an a more personal maybe approach, versus the whole I'm selling all of you approach.
Right.
And then the last one would be if they're asking there, then I'm a big fan of yes, if right then and there, because I've had this happen for me where they're just like, Shannon, how can I take this deeper? And it's at the retreat. Then sure, we can talk about it then and there. But I just love the fact that for me, I like it being fluid, right? So
yes,
totally depends.
For sure. Yes. And I was going to say another approach to this is that perhaps on, if you're hosting a 4-day retreat, perhaps on day 3, you have time apart where people, I have a break in the afternoon. And if you would like to come and have a conversation with me about how we can work together in the future, I'm here if you would like to. So that will be another place during the retreat that can be simply inserted into the flow of the retreat.
But I love how you also said, because I'm a big boundaries person, how you said this is the time, right? So as a retreat leader, you're like, here's my free time that I'm open to meet with anyone, versus like for me, I make it super clear, whether it's through my verbal exchange or just me making myself scarce, that I also have to have my time during the retreat where I remove myself and I regroup, I reboot, whatever. So I love that you're like, during this time, I'm happy to meet with anyone who wants to chat. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, it's very important to model those boundaries, isn't it?
So important. I feel like even if it might feel, it only feels difficult for those who don't have boundaries, in my opinion. And so for some, it might feel difficult where I'm like, nope, I'm not available during this time. However, this time I am. That might feel difficult to someone, but that's because they probably themselves are struggling with boundaries. So yes, I agree with that's the perfect role model, is to do it, of course, in a loving and compassionate way. But these are my times that I'm available. All the rest of the times I'm not, or however you've worded or however your schedule is.
Exactly. We also talked about last time membership, or something that's a bigger group than, the one-on-one or even the small masterminds, but really looking at memberships as a follow-on, especially if you're not a one-on-one person. I will never give up my one-on-ones. I will perhaps shapeshift how many I'm doing and so on, but I love my one-on-one time with the people who come into those programs. And I'm very discriminating about who has that time in my calendar. But for the wider audience, to have something for stress management, for example, I know that that's something that you're very invested in for people. So to have something on the other side that is personal, that is an extension of the retreat, that makes sense for them, that helps them kind of fit the retreat, keep that retreat feeling going in their everyday lives. I think that those are such precious things, both for our clients and also for the extension of the business as well.
I love this because, like we talked about last time, I don't do one-on-ones. Very rarely do I do them. I used to, pre-COVID, but I no longer do. But I do think that there's a precious integration tool and business model for it. Absolutely. However, I also love the fact of memberships or masterminds where depends on your business, right? It depends on many factors. But for me, it's just not feasible for me in my schedule today to do the one-on-ones. However, I love that. And I just interviewed someone today named Andrew, and they have a digital tool that they've launched, and it's called Beon, BEON platform. And it's a digital tool that coaches and retreat leaders, et cetera, so forth, can create journeys for their clients that they can continue on post-retreat. They can start it during the retreat and then continue on post-retreat. So however you do it, whatever model you do that works for you, and if you're a tech person or whatever it is, or if you like, this, what you and I are doing right here, Robyn, whatever it is that fits you is the tool you should use, I think. Sometimes retreat leaders are like, well, everybody's wanting this. It doesn't feel comfortable for me, but they're wanting this. Absolutely not. It has to be in alignment and resonate with you, whatever that integration tool looks like. And then that's what you roll with. That's your offering.
Mm-hmm. I am a researcher at heart. I'm a STEM girl from the time I'm a little kid. I got my first microscope when I was 10, and I was so disappointed in the light source. It was a mirror. But, and then of course, with my PhD in psychology, I became a social scientist along the way. And one of the things that I really believe in is market research and asking the clients, what is it that you will like? There has to be the integration, not just of what I will like, but also how can I be of high service to my clients? And the best way that I know is to ask.
I love that.
For example, this was not a retreat situation, but I was actually doing a training on adding $100,000 to your business using high-end retreats. And I had mentioned to this group I was doing this training with that something about writing a book. And I've, of course, written books. And I used to work as a medical writer in the pharmaceutical industry, which is my research background. And I was talking about that, and I was talking about timelines and getting things done and getting things published. And somebody said, "Will you teach us how to do that?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And so now we're doing a collaborative book with these high-level women leaders who are talking about their origin stories and talking about their perspectives, their philosophies on whatever their expertise is, as a result of somebody saying, "Can you teach me this?" In human design, I don't know a whole lot about that, but I do know I'm a generator, and generators are people who respond to whatever is out in our environment. And for me, with my clients, I'm always listening to what are they asking me for. There has to be some kind of creation that is ready to come through me in response to what my clients are asking me for. So that is always a really good tool to keep in your back pocket. If you don't know what to offer next, ask.
Yes. And to me, it's marrying the two of what they're asking for and what feels in alignment to you.
Yes, for sure.
Not that you can't go out of your comfort zone, because that's a whole other topic too, right? I mean, there is something to be said for stretching yourself, right? And then intuitively listening, like, okay, this stretch, although it feels hard, it feels really, inspiring and motivating or whatever. And then there's that stretch where it feels hard and I just am not feeling it, right? And that's when you have to intuitively listen, like, okay, that's not going to be the direction that maybe you want to go. Is there something else? And then ask, right?
Yeah.
Ask
it and test it and see what happens. And that has always been the way that I have rolled anything that I've ever done out, is listening to what my clients are asking for, what my community is asking for, and then basing a creation and offering on what they're asking for. That is, of course, in alignment with who I am and what my values are and so on. Yes. I think it's a really good practice of listening and responding anyway. So that's kind of how I roll things out in my own business.
I love that. And it can be said to be done at the retreats too, because you're a facilitator. You've also been an attendee. And I'm sure throughout your career, you've attended something where you're like, ooh, that just didn't feel good to me and my body and just who I am. But that's also an opportunity to learn, right? Like, okay, that approach or what that just happened did not feel good to me. And so I know that that's not something that I want to do in my retreats or in my spaces.
Exactly. Like the time that I had a retreat leader run out to my car after me to get me signed up for her next program. I was like, oh.
Yeah, that just right here talking about it makes me feel like crunchy.
Oh, yes. So I say, no, thank you. I will not do that. And then also listening to, I was actually back in my Facebook I'm creating a new training program for retreat leaders, actually. And I was back, this was like a 2016 retreat that I did. And I remember in Scottsdale, Arizona. And one of my attendees said afterwards, she said she was so appreciative that I didn't sell anything during the retreat. And that was kind of where that whole having a one-on-one with every person after, or some kind of outreach after, to say, I have this thing, I think it might be right up your alley. Will you like to have a conversation with me about it? So paying attention to those kinds of very subtle cues rather than trying to steamroll somebody, which to me, I call it bro marketing. And that's just not where I spend my time anyway. So
I don't either. And I've been even quote unquote coached to do that. And I'm like, you know what? It just doesn't resonate with me. I would not like it if I was on a retreat. This is not a great comparison, but we'll just use it. And people are going to listen to this and not like it, but tough shit. It's like that whole, you're not going to draw me to God or religion by telling me all the things I'm doing wrong or telling me how I should be doing this. And if I only did this, then that's going to get me there. I call it the Bible thumping. Isn't that terrible? But anyway, by you living your life and by you demonstrating things and talking about how things are great or whatever it is, then that generates a curiosity in me to ask, right? Yeah. And that's how I live. And that's how I model is we're going to generate conversation and we're going to talk about ideas and we're going to talk about tips and we're going to do workshops and we're going to, kind of juggle some things in your life that you're like, ooh, and look at it differently and examine it and question it. And then you may be interested in taking that step further, right? Mm-hmm. I personally don't do that anymore as far as an integrative tool, although you definitely have had my brain thinking since the last time we talked about bringing something back in a group model, though not so much in the one-on-ones anymore. That has always been my process, is we do things within retreat that will generate a curiosity or a craving or a desire in you to take it further. And then you may approach me on it, or afterwards we might have some conversation about it, but there will not be a sales pitch in my retreat. Again, I'm not knocking that, because there may be a time and place for it. There could be all different types of retreats. There could be different types of workshops. There's just, there's a time and place for everything. It's just it doesn't fit my business. Hey, it's Shannon here. I'm just popping in really quickly to ask a big favor. Would you pause the show and go review it for us? Please. Reviews really help us to be able to get more guests and more experts on the show to help you transform your retreats. So if you wouldn't mind pausing and leaving us a review, that would mean everything. And if you're not already subscribed, do that too.
I think also that it depends on where the retreat fits in your business. I started my business hosting retreats and team builds. So that's always been sort of at the core of what I do. And the output from that is, the retreat itself is a gathering. And then the invitation to continue the journey is part of the process. And that is how I coach the people who come in and work with me, who will like to create, we'll say, analogs in their own businesses. But if you have a major business, if you've got something major going on, for example, if you're still working in the corporate space and you've got a lot of, 9 to 5 things going on, and a retreat is something fun that you will do every quarter or something like that, or twice a year or something like that, it has a very different energy to it, first of all. And second, you can do something I was thinking about for you. I don't even know that you have to be the leader of the follow-on. If you've got an associate coach or somebody who is also an expert in stress management or whatever, it can be something like that continues the relationship with the company, but not necessarily is something that you personally have to be responsible to and for every single week.
Yeah, I love that as well. I love that so much, because there's just so many different, it's almost like you could just sit down and brainstorm. Mm-hmm. That research part, like what would they want? What would they want or feel like they need? What feels in alignment with you, and then get creative with it. It could be a book. It could be a series of ebooks. It could be some digital courses. It could be a membership. It could be a mastermind. It could be one-on-ones. It could be a private, it could be all kinds of different things. The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. Really. It could even be an invitation to the next retreat. I'm doing this again in 6 months, or I'm doing this again next quarter. Will you like to join? And you can create a whatever we'll like to call it, an early bird special or whatever, that they can sign up for it early and so on. I went a few years ago. This is funny. I went on a retreat with my husband, and it was a marriage kind of retreat. And that's what they did, is at the end of it was a massive thing. So of course they had to sell at the end, or an announcement for what was next, because people were asking about that. And it was a sign up for their next destination retreat that they were hosting. And then I think COVID happened or something like that. And so that went out the window at the time. But so there's that creative, like, what is the bigger picture of this? Because I don't think anybody wants a one-off. And the business certainly doesn't want a one-off. The business will like to continue. The business will like to expand. And so we want to honor, I say it this way, we want to honor the consciousness of the business for what it wants to be and to become as well.
I do have 2 tools that we use if we want to talk about continuing the relationship. It's just not necessarily an integrative thing. Yeah. Post-retreat, all of my retreat attendees get 2 things from me. They get a follow-up email that just, of course, thanks them, and then also invites them into our Facebook group. It's an alumni group just for retreaters. And they get a code that they can use on all of our programs. It's an alumni code, so they can use that alumni code to get a discount on any other retreat, workshop, program, course, etc. So that goes out immediately. And then within 2 weeks, they also get an actual card, a handwritten card that has a group picture of all of us from the retreat. And it's just another little nudge and reminder, just a piece of love, really, that I'm sending in the mail. So that happens. And then in the Facebook group, there's a continuing relationship that's something that I'm in almost every day, continuing to nurture, communicate. I learn just as much as they do, ideally. but it's just a continuation of the relationship. So those three things happen. And then also I do birthday things, and I've got just a continuing nurturing,
that's the whole thing, right? It's about the relationship and nurturing the relationship so that you're top of mind when, things went sideways at work. Let me reach out to Shannon and see what she's got going on in her Facebook container, or maybe she's got a new retreat that's coming out as well. So yeah, I think that's such an important piece as well, because the other side of it is, for a retreat leader from the psychology perspective, after a retreat, it's like, I got to take a little while and integrate myself. And so how can I do that? And also make sure that the clients or the retreat attendees are being nurtured, even if I'm behind the scenes needing to take a couple days to, relax and recover from the experience myself. So having those built into place already, having those pre-planned so that you know that they're receiving that even as you're taking some time for yourself, that just makes good sense to do. And it's also good business, because we want them to feel included and nurtured on the other side of the retreat as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's something, it doesn't necessarily fit what we're talking about specifically, but it's still a really valid point that I have seen so many times. Retreat leaders, they leave the retreat and they go straight home. And they literally go straight home, and they're carrying all that energy. They were holding all that space, and they go right home, and then they wonder why they feel sick, or they're just complete shutdown. They usually will get sick, like some sort of cold or virus or something. And they're like, wow, I don't even know what happened. And it's like, well, you were holding so much space in this big container, and then you literally went right back to your own, there was no integration for you. And so I always highly recommend that a retreat leader stay an extra day wherever it is that they are, at least. If they can't do it at the retreat center itself, because maybe they have to flip and get to the next space, then book a hotel. It's just build it into your finances. Mm-hmm. You book a hotel, you spend minimum of one extra night to just process, to cry, to laugh, to write notes, to release, to all those things. I actually prefer 2 nights, but minimum of 1 night, right? Of just processing before you continue on your next journey. And I can tell you that hardly happens.
We have to close the loop. We cannot expect our participants to go back to their lives and do things differently if we are not going back to our lives and doing things differently on the other side of the retreat. Thank you so much for bringing that forward, because one of the things that I always do at the end of my retreat, if I have a team with me, we do, I learned this from one of my teachers a long time ago, a weren't we great party. And we talk about, it's basically processing what went really well, and we nominate each other for, I saw you doing this thing really great, and I was really proud of myself for that, and so on. But it on a meta level gives us perspective on the retreat. So we're extracting ourselves from it and being able to see it from a different perspective, and also recovering as well. At the very minimum, even if I do a day-long one-on-one retreat with a client, I always have on the end of that dinner out with my husband or with one of my friends or something like that, some kind of closure for me. Because the last thing, and I've felt this, maybe you have too, you end a retreat, everybody goes home, and you're there by yourself, like, what just happened?
I tell my guests, I almost feel bereft. I can't think of another word. It's like, I'm bereft, like,
Yes. The energetics of the retreat, holding the space, as you mentioned, and then closing the space. We open it. We have our opening ceremony. We go through the retreat, and then we have to close it. We have to close the space. And at the end of the retreat, I have this thing that we do. I call it toning. This is so funny. I'm talking about this. I didn't plan on this, but this is a fun thing that I've learned is I have everybody stand in a circle, and everybody puts their hands in the middle of the circle at the bottom, like toward the bottom, toward the ground. And we raise our hands up, and we tone as we go from low tone to high tone. And we raise our hands, and we break up the energy of the retreat as we celebrate the ending of it. That breaks up the energy of it too, so that everybody can go their separate ways without feeling still kind of tied into it or enmeshed with it in a way that eventually becomes unhealthy.
And talk about also including the vagal tone. I just love that.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
I love that. And the other thing too, that just tiny bit piggyback, and then we can jump back into, because this is what happens to me is I'll take us in tangents. I also do recommend that the guests don't go straight home either, that they give themselves this. It's very similar processing. It's just looks and feels a little different as far as what specifically they're processing. But if they just leave that container and they go straight home, it goes right back into what you talked about earlier and including on the other show, which is it's like this shock to the system almost. And then they're going to hurry up and put all that shit back into another box because no way.
Yeah, I got to hit the ground running again. Well, in fact, I'm going on a retreat in Greece in September for a personal retreat for myself. I'm joining some people there. And I'm arriving a day early to get acclimated. And of course, the time zone differences and everything. And then on the other side, I'm taking a couple days on the way back to reacclimate, to come back into the world. Because when you're in a place out of space and out of time, everything feels different. You know, for me and for where I am in my own journey, there's a lot of shifts that can happen in this particular retreat. I think is 10 days. So I will be, if you talk to me on the other side of that retreat, I'm sure I will have some other things to say that will be very different than what we've heard so far. But the idea here is, to your point, of giving yourself some spaciousness on either side. So it's not just a get in. I used to teach swimming lessons. I'd say to the kids, get in, get wet, get out. We don't want that for retreats. We want some extension in the re-entry for sure.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons at my own venue, I started offering check-in the night earlier before the retreat and check-in a night later, but there's no programming. We're not even present, where you get the space, the quietness. You can hang out in the sauna or do those types of things, but there's nobody's interacting with you unless you're asking for it, if that makes sense. So you're just getting this quiet space to just either get ready for the retreat or process. You can stay in your room the whole time, whatever it is. And so I just started adding that on this year, I think, and surprised that, there's a lot of people who are taking advantage of it. And also just logistic wise, it helps with flights and not having to rush. And there's all that kind of stuff too, that is not necessarily an integration thing, but it is logistically. So
it sure is. I mean, when we talk about a place out of time, we're actually, from the moment we sign up for the retreat, even if it's a month or two out, the retreat, I believe, starts working on us. It starts working on getting us prepared for it, leading up to the days of the retreat. And then on the other side of it, the retreat itself continues to work on us on the other side. I think we do ourselves a disservice if we're not allowing that spaciousness. But it is very, very different from our 9 to 5 TikTok, not the app, but the literal sound of time ticking away, that we leave. We get off the gerbil wheel, we go into the retreat, and we just really need the spaciousness. And that's what we want to bring back too, so that even our daily life shifts as a result of the work that we did in the retreat.
Yeah, that's actually, we're talking about integrative tools. That still is a tool that maybe it's not something that you can or cannot monetize. To me, truthfully, you can. You just book the venue an extra day and build that into your cost as far as giving them that space. But also you could just recommend it in your communication, like, hey, here's some local hotels or Airbnbs or something. I highly recommend that you take this time for yourself before you go home, whatever may be the case. And so just building that into your communication, I think, would be super helpful for your guests. For sure.
I love that. I love that you do that at your retreat center too. That's really cool that you do it that way.
Yeah, I just started it this year. So I think it was mostly just me looking at my own learnings. Like just like you said, when I go to a retreat and I'm an attendee, I always go a minimum of 1 day before and a minimum of 2 days after before I go back home. And then if I'm hosting, it's actually the same amount of time, although I go 2 days before. So I go 2 days before I'm hosting, and then I stay 2 extra days, just like I am when I do my retreat in Tulum this year. But I'm not complaining about staying an extra few days in Tulum.
No, I would not complain about that at all. That's wonderful that you're doing the retreat there.
Yeah, I love that space. Hey guys, I'm popping in to ask a quick question. Are you ready to elevate your marketing game and fill those retreat slots faster than ever? Of course you are. That's why you're here. And we've got the toolkit for you. Our top 5 marketing tools for retreat leaders guide. This isn't just a guide. It's your marketing guru wrapped up in one easy-to-follow package. Dive into the essentials of social media marketing, where we show you how to leverage those platforms to create a community buzzing with excitement for your retreats. Also, unleash the power of content marketing with strategies that educate and engage your potential guests. Plus, we'll dive into email marketing, SEO, and partnership opportunities that open new doors and bring in streams of attendees. So why wait to make your retreats the talk of the town? Download your free guide today by visiting retreatmarketingtools.com and start transforming your retreat dreams into reality. Okay, well, any other thoughts or suggestions as far as, one of the things that's just really resonating with me is that touch point after the retreat, just doing that touch point. Do you physically call each of your guests? Is that kind of how your touch point looks?
I invite them to book a call with me, or I'll email them and say, let's book a call. Here's the thing that I will like to say about this, because I sell all of my stuff is high end, high ticket, high end. And if you're not comfortable with the high ticket, high end conversations, then that is the place that is, I love the word crunchy today. That's the place where things are going to get crunchy for you. And so we have to get on the back end, just make sure that you're super comfortable with having that level of conversation with people and inviting people into these bigger programs based on, the investments that they've already made in the retreat, and then, whatever is on the other side of that. So giving them kind of that menu of options and advising them. They already ought to know this if they know you and they know kind of what your price ranges are for your services. They ought to be then prepared for, in other words, some people should not be in sticker shock around your pricing. But I will say that I think over time, as I've coached people in this, the place where that people require some additional either coaching or advising or just mentoring on this is the high end sales conversation, because it is kind of a horse of a different color compared to selling a $29 monthly membership or something like that.
Totally agree. I'm a big fan, even if you are a luxury high-end person, that you still have I call it my middle product, right? It's not a $29 product, because if you're luxury, it's not going to benefit you whatsoever to have a $29 product. Honestly, that's not ever going to be your customer. And I don't mean to sound like a dick, but there's enough people out there who do beautiful work in that price range. Yep. However, here's your high ticket item, and then here's your build up to the high ticket item, right? And so I'm a big believer of that. And I also am just a believer of, you have to know your value. There is a price and a experience and a comfort level that is yours, whatever that looks like. I do get a little sad, I will just be honest, when someone, before, when I used to do coaching one-on-one, and people would be like, here's what I'm going to offer. And they tell me how much. And I'm like, what? Don't you think higher of yourself and your years of experience and just your energy and the time that no. And there's a lot of people in the retreat space who have a very hard time with money blocks. That's totally separate from, serving, and it's just money blocks that they have. Yes. And they use language that's like, well, I want it to be accessible, or they're trying to use this language to justify their own money blocks. And it's like, no. Oh, accessibility is relative.
We can have a whole other conversation about the psychology of women making money as well, because that's the whole thing around the high end sales and luxury sales and things like that. And then the underpricing and undervaluing ourselves as women is something that has been, well, that's top of my mind most of the time. In I think 2011, the World Bank came out with this statistic that women at the time made up about 45% of the workforce, but only possess about 1% of the wealth on the planet. So we have a lot of work to do in that area still all these years later. And I think that if we're going to be offering, it's not about the quality of the work for sure. It is more about elevating consciousness around attracting, receiving, and holding wealth in our own fields and our own bank accounts. That's the work. And I think that retreats and VIP days and things like that are such a microcosm. And if you can knock those out of the park, that goes such a long way to expanding the wealth consciousness that is really we're being called up to right now as women.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it literally hurts my heart when I see some of the conversations that are happening around money and value and offerings. And then it goes into that whole, well, you're evil if you're trying to make a profit. And it's just, and that, again, I don't care what anyone says personally, that's just a money block of some sort. there's a essential devaluing that's happening, and it literally is from what you're saying. It's generational, it's societal almost, because the retreat industry is primarily women. There are plenty of men in the field, and I love that so much, but it is primarily women. And we typically have a hard time with saying, I am worth this. And so that needs some work. Maybe that's something, Robyn, we can attack together.
Well, I think so. I think that, it's women in the US weren't allowed to have bank accounts by themselves without a signature of a man until like 1974. So it's only been about 1.5 generations since that's even been the case in the US, not to mention what's going on around the world with women and money. So yes, I think that especially when we're looking at retreats, and especially when we're looking at the increasing quality of life, we have a responsibility to not just ask for, but attract, receive, and hold wealth on all levels. And that does include business. Behind every successful retreat leader is a very, very, very successful business. We have to have the business acumen and what do I want to say about this? Just the responsibility to do well and do good in the world. That's how you're going to be of high service in the retreat. You cannot go into the retreat if you are depleted, if your bank account is empty, whatever. If you are in sacrifice mode for the retreat, that is going to show up in the bank account, and that's what has to shift.
And that energy will be present in your space. I mean,
for sure.
I heard a quote the other day, and it just resonated so much. It's like, if you're approaching anything with scarcity will be the result, regardless. Yeah. And so I just love this. Praise be, hallelujah, all that yeses.
Yes, well, we have ongoing conversations I see in our future, I think, about these topics.
I do too.
The retreats are the kind of the high level stuff, but behind the scenes, there's a lot going on with people who are wanting to host retreats and wanting to go to retreats and wanting to see the world and experience different things. And we got to have money to do that. And we have to have money for our higher calling too.
Yeah.
For taking care of the things that are most important for us and our families in the world.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, thank you so much for once again sharing your incredible energy, knowledge, experience, helping retreat leaders to dig deeper into themselves, for not just themselves, but for those who they serve. So thank you. And I have a feeling I will see you on the show again.
I think so too. And I think we'll have you over on mine as well. I think that'll be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the Retreat Leaders Podcast. Learn more at www.theretreatranch.com. See you next time.